The right neurologist for CIDP, to treat CIDP, is a neuromuscular neurologist. That's the same kind of neurologist that treats ALS and some of these other things. A regular neurologist is someone that treats multiple sclerosis and epilepsy and stuff like that. So they're different. I remember the day that my first neurologist, I've been to 5, which I'll get to. My first neurologist, I remember the day he told me that he was referring me to a neuromuscular neurologist, and I was like, huh, what's that? Because I didn't have a diagnosis yet. And I get on my phone and Google neuromuscular doctor, neurologist, and it's like ALS, ALS, ALS. And I was like, oh my God, he thinks I have ALS, which that is like the #1 thing that probably most of these neuromuscular neurologists handle. So I was a little scary. But anyways, that's the right kind of neurologist to have, and they're going to be the most educated on CIDP. And also, I just really wanted to stress the importance of not only getting a second opinion, maybe even a third. I've been to, like I said, to 5 neurologists. But neurological conditions are so weird and crazy. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you've already heard me talk about how there's really not a definitive test for CIDP or maybe some of these other neurological conditions. It's more like process of elimination or looking at this test and that and the overall picture of symptoms. It's hard. It's not like a broken bone. It's not like you break your leg and go and they get you into the x-ray and they're like, yep, it's a clean break or it's a fracture. I mean, the neurological system, you can't really just put it under a microscope and be like, and then, or sew it back together or whatever. So it's just good to get multiple opinions so that you can make sure that you have an accurate diagnosis, so you can make sure you have the right treatment and know what you're doing. But also, it's just part of the art of healing from CIDP is getting the right combination of medicine. Because it's not like you just take a round of steroids and you're better. There's 4 main treatments, which I've talked about in other videos. But sometimes you have to change the frequency or the dose or even just the combination of them. IVIG did not work for me by itself at first. I had to do some other things, but now I'm off all medication. I mean, it's just a journey. And if you are dealing with a neurologist that you don't feel like understands how big of a deal this is and how much time is of the essence, because it is, if you do not get your condition under control, you're going to have more nerve damage the longer that it's not, not in control. Nerve damage you might have the rest of your life. I mean, it really is, 1 week, 1 month, 2 months, it matters. It just does. So you need to have a doctor that has a sense of urgency. And I know the difference myself. And also, not all neurologists or neuromuscular neurologists are created equal. Even if they have the best hearts in the world, even if they're just as smart as each other, they're not. And I talk about this in some of my other videos, but I want to reiterate and re-stress it because of how important it is. My first neurologist I went to when I was living in Las Vegas, he was highly recommended. He was recommended to me 5 times that he was the best in town. And I didn't know better. It was my first neurologist. And my mom calls him, a 1-horse town doctor. She's like, you went to that 1-horse town doctor. Anyways, I just thought how he was just how a neurologist was. And I would probably be running right now, and I would probably not have clawed hands right now had he been different. He was just very lackadaisical, very, no sense of urgency. Like, we'll run some test and schedule you for your next appointment. And that's not how it should be. It's not. And I have a great neurologist now that I know I can reach out to anytime, and she would just she understands it's an emergency and how sensitive your nerves can be. And the other thing is, if you are still unstable, go somewhere like the Mayo Clinic or UT Southwestern in Texas. Go to these, Northwestern in Chicago, John Hopkins. You go to these big UCLA, these big major neurological hospitals, because the thing is, they're able to do all the testing needed in one day. The first neurologist I went to only tested arms one time and then legs one time because insurance wouldn't pay for both on the same day, and I had to schedule things out, and it just wasn't good. And follow your heart too. My first neurologist, I was getting so frustrated. I'm getting worse. I'm getting weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. And I feel like he's just not even acknowledging that. I didn't feel seen or heard. And I called and canceled, and I was like, I'm changing neurologists. And the lady at the front desk made me change my mind. She's like, no, you'll love him. All his patients love him. You know, come get your EMG and nerve conduction test because you have to get them done anyways. And I was just like, fine. And I only went because I knew I was going to have to get those tests done anyways. Little did I know that it doesn't matter if I got them done there or not, because when I go to the next neurologist, every neurologist has to do a new EMG and nerve conduction. So I did it for no reason. And these are just things you don't know. And the Mayo Clinic had me diagnosed in 2 days. I went to the other guy for 6 months. 6. It matters. Not all neurologists are the same. And if you're in the beginning of your journey, you know, you might really love your neurologist around the corner or a family neurologist or whatever. And I'm not saying they're not great. They're probably great. They just don't have the same testing or network or as these major neurological hospitals. They just don't, they're not as equipped to be able to help you get on the right path. So I went, so I went to a neurologist, then a neuromuscular, and then I was just like sick of dealing with the small town doctors. Then I went to the Mayo, got a diagnosis in 2 days. Then I went to UCLA for a second opinion because I was still declining. And then I started getting better at UT Southwestern. So anyways, I could go on and on and on and go into detail about each of these neurologists. All I can say is there's such a difference between all of them, and 3 of those 5 are major neurological hospitals. And still, I had issues at the Mayo and UCLA, to be honest. I hate to name drop, but it's just from my experience. UT Southwestern has been the best. And I loved the Mayo Clinic because they got me diagnosed so fast, but my follow-up care was neglected me quite a bit, actually. I went from walking to being paralyzed from the neck down based on their recommendations, even with me reaching out and asking for additional treatment. But hey, my UT Southwestern neurologist, I ended up where I'm supposed to be. I ended up with a good neurologist. I ended up with somebody that would never let that happen to me. The second I told her I was declining, she would get me like in the emergency room if she had to make sure that I was okay. It makes such a difference. If you don't feel like your neurologist is on your side and has a sense of urgency with you, you need a new neurologist. Also get a second opinion. And if you're still declining from CIDP, something needs to be adjusted. Because CIDP, you can relapse, but you should always at least be stable or getting a little bit stronger. But if you're declining, something's up, I think. But anyways, good luck. If you have any questions, let me know. If you have to travel to go to a good neurologist, I'm telling you it's worth it. 2 days at the Mayo Clinic versus 6 months at the local doctor. It's worth it.